Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to begin this new panel, or this new module, with this roundtable on cyber resilience in the private sector. And we will follow the same structure as the other roundtables that we've had in the conference. First, I will be introducing the speakers in the panel. Then I will move to the object of our discussion today, and I'll give the floor to the four speakers so that they can refer to their organization and tell us about cyber resilience. Then I'll be asking some questions, and if we have the time, I'd like them to have questions. I'd like to have questions from the audience. So first, I'd like to introduce the speakers with experience in the field of cybersecurity. To my right, from the right to the left. First, we have Juan Atanasio Carrasco, who is the head of engineering of the nuclear plant of Trillo. He's an industrial engineer of A.I.E, executive MBA, and an expert in computer engineering. And he's also security director. Apart from that, he's a CISO of the CNPIC and Trillo, and he is head of control systems in the power plant, in the nuclear plant. Then we also have García Lamela to my right, coming from an insurance company. He is the head of the control center of MAPFRE. He is a computer scientist, and he has a degree with the University Polytechnic of Madrid. He has different certificates and more than 15 years in the field of security and safety, working in consultancy and in insurance companies. And now he's not just working in MAPFRE, he's also the head of the ISMS Center for the past 2 years. To my left, I have Lafoz Naval, who's the head of operations of the distribution network of ENDESA. Carlos is a technical industrial engineer by the Polytechnic University of Catalonia. He's an engineer in automated processes by the UNED. He has been working for 30 years in the electricity sector, in the power sector, and also hydro plants. And then we also have Simón Martínez García from the Madrid undergrad metro, and he has over 20 years of experience in ICT, and he has been working for the field of ICT security and cybersecurity for the past 17 years, and he has an MBA with Ciudad University. Can I have that? Thank you. I'd like to refer briefly to the object of our roundtable. First, we tend to speak about the concept of resilience. What is resilience? And in this case, that's even more complex if we speak about cyber resilience. So cyber resilience is one of the objectives of national security. That is the capacity of systems to continue being operational if they are under attack or if they're facing an incident. In the framework of the national security strategy, we have some lines for strategic action that are within the field of cybersecurity, and one of the objectives is this: to improve safety and resilience of ICT in the public sector through the use of the powers of the public authorities, and also to reflect on public-private cooperation and partnerships, and to think about the ICT being used by private sectors, and then in the protection of critical infrastructure, what kind of actions are needed to increase resilience capacities. In the field of strategy for cybersecurity, also from the private-public point of view, resilience has an important role from the public perspective, because we need to guarantee telecommunication systems being used by public authorities, that they have an acceptable level of security and resilience. And if we're speaking about the private sector, we have to foster resilience of ICT systems for businesses in particular. And in our strategy for cybersecurity, we have a strategic line, number 5, that is the actual focus of this panel. That is the cyber resilience of ICT in the private sector. And that's why each of the speakers is going to be speaking about this from the respective business sectors, and they will share how their businesses understand this aspect of resilience, cyber resilience. Excuse me, but I'm not pointing in the right direction, I'm afraid. No, this is not working. Yes, you have to point in that direction. Can you do that yourselves? Okay, now there you go. I can come up here if that's easier. It doesn't look easier though. So my apologies, first of all. I think that this is going to work now. As my company is now well known, Centrales Nucleares Trillo, we thought that maybe we should introduce ourselves, CNPIC, as nuclear plants Trillo. What are the bases for cybersecurity that we have and for cyber resilience? And then some comments about cyber resilience, and leave some questions for the discussion. And in the private sector, what do we have as support from the public sector, what we would like to have? CNPIC is a private company. It's owned by the most important power industries in Spain. We operate the power plants of the nuclear plants of Almaraz-Trillo. One of them is of US design and another one is of German design. And we own other, we're members of the Nuclear Energy Institute and WANO. We have produced around 8% of the total energy power being produced in Spain, and we hire more than 800 workers. Why are we here? Of course, because they have called us. We didn't know. We of course wanted to take part, and because we have taken part in the survey of cyber resilience by the CESI and CNPIC in the past 2 years. Apart from that, we understand that high resilience implies high security, and for us, security always comes first. We understand that resilience in our plants is one of our assets, and we want to learn as much as possible. And the size of CNPIC, I have an engineering background, and we want to see how CISOs work, and I'm a CISO for the nuclear part of the business. Okay, what is cybersecurity in CNPIC and in the Spanish nuclear sector? First, we have developed well ahead the standard, and we have tried to look for good resilience because we have risks. In our sector, the risk is not so high, despite of what people understand or see from the outside. But of course, we see that there's a risk, and we've done it looking at the design of our plants, of our nuclear plants. And we need to have isolation from the outside. Time is of essence, and time is reduced if our isolation systems are activated. We have been inspired by the steps taken by the US sector, by the Nuclear Energy Institute and NRC. There was a multidisciplinary call, and we also have prior projects. So we had a program that was developed throughout 4 years, 4 to 5 years, and with some landmarks that we should be achieving as fast as possible. And then we're also integrated in different programs. We also have different programs for management of emergencies, monitoring, etc., so that each change is included here and we can use it as background. A silly example, we have somebody regulating the keys to the rooms. That person, apart from controlling the keys, knows have to watch over the systems with cameras, and they have the keys to the critical assets, then that's support. We have a training program as well. It was a very active program. We have a month of training per worker. And within those plans, if we include cybersecurity trainings, then that's also an important step forward. What reference do we have in cyber resilience? The Cyber Resilience Review was issued by the Homeland Security Department, and there it says that if a good security plan will ensure cyber resilience. If we go through the items, we can say if I'm capable of implementing all these points, then my resilience capacity will be good. Another reference are the indicators, the cyber resilience indicators. These are the ones we've developed, and they're very similar to the ones developed by the Department of Homeland Security, where they have control management and policies, and maybe we lack situational awareness or external facilities, but we will have it in a way. So these are the references, and that's it. Thank you very much, Juan. Thank you for your presentation. Now we'll speak about the field of insurance. Daniel, from your sector, from your viewpoint, how are you working around resilience? We're sorry, but the microphone is off and we cannot hear the speaker in the booth.
Ahora sí.
We're sorry, but the microphone is still off.
Se me oye a mí, yo creo. Me habéis puesto a mí.
Bueno, ahora. Sí.
Si quieres te paso el micro.
¿Lo tienes?
No sé qué es lo que te va a tocar. Se va a apagar.
Son los problemas del directo. Es decir, que...
Está claro.
Yo creo que tiene puesto el mío. ¿A mí se me oye? ¿A mí se me oye?
Sí.
Tenéis puesto el mío, yo creo, ¿eh?
Vale.
Bueno, si no... Vale, está perfecto. Muy bien. Bueno. No, les iba a decir...
Okay, so we're going to have a brief introduction of MAPFRE. It's going to be very brief. We're an insurance company. We're present in 45 countries. We have over 12 million customers. One thing that I need to highlight is that the services we offer customers have in 4 CPDs, one in Madrid, another one in Sao Paulo, another one in Miami, and another one in Boston. So whenever we speak about cyber resilience, one of the factors that helped push this concept of cyber resilience was continuity. And quite recently, with the Irma hurricane, we had a pre-crisis scenario, because in the end it was not that the hurricane could have an effect on Miami, but as we have some concentration of technological capacities there, that you could not deliver a service in Miami, of course everybody can understand that, but that you cannot deliver a service in Colombia, that's not understandable. So when we speak about cyber resilience, we were from the beginning inspired by continuity. And in recent years, and I know that there is an institute that was that issued a report claiming that the most important cause for continuity to be breached are cyber risks. But whenever we speak about cyber resilience, we speak about something else. We're speaking about how to let a company work in a stressful environment and that may last in time. And this is how we started working. How did we work in MAPFRE? We worked on two fields. First, trying to have capacities in the organization for scenarios that prior to an incident, we're speaking about the need to identify sector-based attacks, internet attacks, vulnerabilities, external partnerships, public-private partnerships, and supporting ourselves and supporting each other in cyber resilience. And we need to know our environment well to do that. On the other hand, we've also worked on in a scenario in which we know that we're going to have a scenario of a cyber incident, same as this is just like what we do for continuity. So we are trying to respond to an incident, and we're trying to see that our contention strategies are capable of complying with our business requirements. And our business requirements do not always have to be in line with, or continuity requirements are not always in line with cyber resilience in the field of continuity of operations. There are three key aspects we've had to face. First, that the company has to have, or the organization has to consider that sometimes there might be a conflict between requirements of continuity and requirements against a security incident. When we're doing an RTO and RPO, that is for us to make sure that we have the technical capacities to face the situation and that the business can work. But sometimes the managers of the company may decide, or will have to decide between stopping the organization and not complying with these requirements, or continue working in a scenario that will make the incident more severe. A second determining aspect in our field is that the cost is important. In a scenario of continuity, we tend to look at the effects, an earthquake or whatever, but here we need to know what happened, because otherwise we'll be wasting our time and resources, and we will be looking at continuity scenarios where we have not solved the problem. And this is something we need to be aware of. And last but not least, periodical testing. Of course, we have written our goals, business goals, but still we test them every now and then. We need to test cyber resilience scenarios at all levels. And we have like this with the Crisis Management Committee, because this body, to conclude, is the body who can make a decision regarding the modification of the availability requirements that we have in our continuity plans. Thank you. David, Daniel, Carlos, from the point of view of the power grid, how do you work in cyber resilience? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Before you realize yourselves, I have to say that I'm not an expert in cybersecurity. I'm sorry if I disappointed you. And I'd like to speak more about the business. We are a cyber target for cyber terrorism, to define it somehow. I'll try to share the context with you so that we understand the scope. First, we need to explain how the electricity grid works. In the field of utilities, as the operations director of ENDESA, I will be speaking about the grid and distribution. The power grid, and I'm very enthusiastic about this, is one of the biggest inventions of humankind. It gets everywhere. It's hardly comparable to anything else. Look at the product that we use. The product we deliver is a very weird product. It cannot be touched, it cannot be smelled, and it's fresh. We have to produce it in the moment we need it. A few products of this kind. The grid allows us to distribute the product to the point where it's needed and it's going to be used. This, of course, forces us a bit perverse because we have to manage this in real time. We cannot wait and do it later. If you want to have something onto the grid, you have to have energy, you have to have power at that point. You know about this, you use it every day. Power has so many uses, and this is a universal thing. We can use it to have light, heating, for engines, for mobile phones, so it has many different uses. This for us to have an idea, what are the assets, the physical assets of power facilities? What do we have on the field? We have power plants. Juan was speaking about a case, in the case of nuclear plants, but we have many different types of plants. We have substations where we process the energy. And then we also have distribution centers where this is again transformed, and we have control centers. This is one of the important and sensitive points that govern the grid remotely. Then we also have lines, towers, cables, wires. So there's a physical infrastructure that's on the ground. What happens when we switch on the light? Have you ever thought about this? Behind the simple gesture of switching on the light, we could do it with this lamp. We switch it on, we have light, but many things are happening. Somewhere, in some power plant, they have to generate this energy, and we have to take it to this point. That's a weird thought. And, of course, if we think about the electricity system, it has to be stable. There has to be a balance between what we produced and what we are using. This is a very special feature of our business. And we know that this is a point where we have to keep the balance stable, the scale stable, so that we do not have problems in terms of imbalances with the consequences that may happen. Of course, it's more complex than this, but just to simplify matters, I would just like to present two brush strokes of what safety means for our systems. I will be going back in time in history and compared to what we have now. Several years ago, we used to have few but large production system. These large power plants were far away from consumers, so they needed to have some transportation system, etc. What does this mean? We had few control points. Communication networks were not very big. We didn't have too many points to be controlled. There were many local operations, people somewhere doing stuff. But communication networks used to be private networks. For example, you might be familiar with safety in the dark. This is something that we used to use in the electricity sector. We had strange protocols, high-frequency protocols. And we had, for example, ICCP, different control systems, and it was a very closed system. It makes us feel safe. Then we have a concept of N-M-1. This is a concept we use. It's a concept related to resilience. How resilient your grid is to failure. And I'll give you an example. If there is a village, there's a road and there's a tree on the road, you cannot reach the village. N-M-1 is telling us that whenever that main road is not working, it can go through another road. And this is what happens with the grid. We try to have one or several points, N-2, N-3. What other elements do we have that may be sensitive? Not before, but now they do. Electromechanical registration or gauges. They had to go there. We had to send a guy to see this. So this creates some physical vulnerability. So what is the trend now? We're in the era of digitalization, not just in the electricity sector, but in most sectors. And in our sector, the paradigm is shifting. And I'm sure that you read this in the news, and the information that's distributed is changing our model. We're not building large plants that are far away from the consumer, but small plants, and of course we have to respect some elements of the basic grid model. But we have many more points to balance, to keep the system in balance, and they need to have control. They need to have systems that are properly integrated, that may be in a position to manage the grid. This is a concept of a smart grid. Communication networks are also going through deep transformations. We are opening our grid to standard protocols based on IPs. N-1 of the power grid is now becoming an N-1 of the communication network. And the concept of smart metering, intelligent devices that are constantly communicating. So this is a matter of physical vulnerability. And you have a clear example here. This is something that may happen to the grid. And cyber attack, I'm not speaking about phishing with ENDESA. It could happen to any company. It's not particular of a sector. But we are speaking about an attack, a cyber attack to control networks, and that may have difficult consequences. So in ENDESA, we are adding cybersecurity in our contingency plans and emergency plans. So we're not just concerned about the safety of people and facilities, but we're also working and being engaged with cyber attacks and their effects. Thank you very much, Carlos. So during this first round of introductions from Metro de Madrid and the public transportation system, how are you working on the field of cyber resilience? Good afternoon, can you hear me? Yes? First, I'm sure that many of you know Metro of Madrid, the Madrid underground system. I'm sure that you might have used it at some point or the other. I'd like to say who we are and what functions we have, because this is related to cyber resilience and the topic we're addressing. We are a railway company of the Madrid region. We reach almost all the municipalities in the region, and we have around 590 million trips or users, travelers. Our main functions are three. One is to use the network. The other one is to improve the service, and the third one is the maintenance and optimization of our facilities. And this is something we want to do with quality and efficient services. I say this because when I was asked to participate in this panel, I was trying to think about cyber resilience and services. If we go to the concept of resilience, in the end, this is an intrinsic capacity of a system, of a business, of an organization, but it is part of it. And if we go to the ecological perception, this is an intrinsic capacity of a person to overcome a threat or a stressful situation. If we want to deliver a service, quality service, and this is one of our capacities, the concept of resilience has to be intrinsic to the organization. It has to be something that cuts across the whole organization. It has to allow us to be that way. So, and then when we speak about cyber resilience, we just have to extrapolate this concept to the world of cyberspace, of cyber attacks, to the world of technology. But we must not forget that in the end, we're not speaking about anything new. It's true that we are in an environment of mobility, 4.0 industries, interconnection of all the systems at all times, convergence of all the environments, technological environments, but we should not lose sight of the fact that we're not speaking about anything new. We've always been in charge of trying to have a capacity to recover whenever we have an incident. And this is how we're facing this. This is something that is an evolution, and we have to be ready for an environment in which we have unknown risks, and they change all the time, and it's an environment of uncertainty. But we really need to see it from this perspective, and we're doing this as a process that cuts across the whole organization. There is cybersecurity, and cyber resilience is just an element of this. Apart from that, we know that all of us here, this is supported by different lines, as Ignacio said, that is a cybersecurity strategy, and the PIC law also claims that we need to have the capacity to deliver services. A new regulation of data protection is also asking us to keep our systems in place, that systems are resilient, and the NIS directive, the NIS directive, whenever it is implemented, it will also ask us to have resilient systems. This is not just something internal, but it is something that has different requirements and legal requirements. And the last point, as Juan was saying, the reason why we're here is because we, from the beginning, we have also taken part in the survey organized by INCIBE. And the 2 editions, we've taken part at and that has helped us improve a bit. And we were sure about the aspects that we have had in INCIBE. And if we want to anticipate, then we need to work on the field of risk assessment, training, and surveillance and intelligence. When we're speaking about resisting, we have to manage vulnerabilities. Recovery means that we need to manage incidents, and when we want to evolve, it means we have to learn from what happened and how to improve communications, so that we are all together and all of us improving and working. Thank you, Antonio. After this first round by the 4 speakers, I've taken down some notes, and I wanted to ask you some questions. I think that this is not just something that involves your departments alone, but the organization as such. In your organizations, if you want to have an organization that's cyber resilient, regardless of the role that is being played by the security departments, IT departments, do you think that we need to have the whole organization involved and participation from top management to the different levels in this process of resilience? Because can we have a cyber resilient structure if the organization is not resilient? Maybe if you are brief, we can ask another question. Well, yes, I'd like to answer your question with your question. Has any of you has done any campaign on phishing? Can you raise your hand? Has any of you had 0 failures, 0 people who have gone for phishing? No. I think that from top management to the end users, everybody has to participate. We started from a multidisciplinary approach using advanced programs, and of course we take for granted that if the whole organization is not participating and if they're not active, then we're not resilient. I agree. Scenarios with cyber resilience do not just have to look at the technical side, but to the different departments. Sometimes we have problems because we cannot be calling all departments for tests, but we really need to see the scenarios. For example, legal department, human resources, social responsibility, and communication. They have to be part of a plan. They always have to be part of a plan. And of course, top management. In particular, in our case, the last drill we had for continue to plan included a scenario of cyber attack, and we engaged top management without their knowledge. and it was quite successful. Carlos? I think this is not just necessary but a must. We have to involve the whole organization at all levels. In our case, our organization is quite complex because it has an Iberian structure but also a global structure. And I think that the part of cyber resilience can be achieved in systems, but the foundations of cyber resilience is in people. And the awareness that you can raise, we have to stop users from using the resources of a company unaware of the consequences. I think that somebody mentioned this. You click on a link, and this is from a bank, and say, oh, this is not my bank, but you have clicked. So this lack of awareness is something we need to avoid. In the case of ENDESA, we have 9 people today from different spheres. As I said, I'm not an expert in cybersecurity, but my other colleagues are. And in different business lines and different global or Iberian branches. So that's important. We also need to engage people, not just train them, but engage them in cyber exercises. They have to live it, and they have to see what may happen if they are unaware of their behaviors. Thank you, Carlos. Antonio? Yeah, I also agree. This is not something that is outside of the organization in 2 ways. First, people, you have to train them, you have to engage them, because in the end, they're victims or attack vectors that are going to allow an attack to your company. And they have to be ready to react. But then from the point of view of organizations, we know that the technological infrastructure is just an element to support our business. And if you want to be cyber resilient, you need to know your business well. You need to know your processes. Everything we discussed as safety by design is something that is prepared to support the business. And in this case, if we just go to technological structures, I think that that's an important element here. This technology has to be reliable. It has to be a reliable product. And this may involve a lot of R&D and I. And we're speaking about talent. And we have to invest in talent, and we have to invest in technology. So we're speaking about support and talent so that we can have resilience. Thank you, Antonio. Let me go back to another question, looking at what you were mentioning before. And how different corporations, how different organizations have to adapt to new threats and surrounding changes in order to have cyber resilience and to be efficient in cyber resilience. Antonio, if you want.
I think I've made it clear enough. So, I believe that I've already mentioned it in the 2 presentations that I've given you. It has to be cross-cutting. We have to look at it from a strategic, tactical viewpoint. We're all involved. There are organizations, there are processes, there are technologies. We have to bear in mind all of this. Detection, defense, protection, and response. We don't bear this in mind, we're not going to have a good result. I also think that apart from awareness, it's basic for the organization to respond and to have a specific organization for responses, because after all, this is a major company and it even conveys, it's transferred to many countries. So apart from bringing one thing to another, in Spain, we're still ahead of other countries. So we have this through the organization. Another important thing is to detect the vulnerabilities, to detect measures to prevent these attacks completed within the organization. to obliged to have internal audits, drills, or whatever exercises that may help us validate the prevention work. This is very important. We're speaking about times of war and times of peace. These things should be prepared in times of peace, not in times of war. Once you're in a mess, then it will be difficult. Thank you very much, Carlos. In order to have it efficiently in such scenarios, very complicated. The bad guys are usually counting on more means. They certainly have more time than we do. And to make matters worse, the balance is totally tipped. When they touch you once, if they are successful, then the balance will tip in their favor. However, if you're capable of detecting and responding all the threats, the balance, the scale is not tipped. In our organizations, we're all based on technology. The technology that is secure today, we are clear that in a short period of time or longer period of time, it will no longer be so. So we have to be aware at all times. And we've learned this after the WannaCry crisis. We have to have everything updated. Basic safety mechanisms, fighting against obsolescence. That's absolutely necessary. But that's not all. We have to be based on external relations with INCIBE to exchange information, with the platform that we have adopted. So altogether we can try and offset this imbalance, and always proving, as Carlos has said, continuously, whether it's us internally in times of peace, with the cyber exercises that are conducted periodically, or with the crisis management initiatives. So we'll conclude, in our sector we are very much aware of operational experiences and learning from others. This, together with continued improvement, we want to be the best, and we have gained a lot with that. And we will be able to face new threats, as Daniel says, but for that we have collaboration with external organizations like INCIBE to continue to adapt. Very well. I think it's clear enough how 4 corporations in different sectors working on cyber resilience, and I'll stick to the need to work at different levels. It's very important how cyber resilience is also an important goal within the framework of the strategy of national security, and also in the field of strategy of cybersecurity. It's been interesting, but we don't have time, so thank you very much. And well, Daniel, Carlos, Antonio, thank you all for this round table.